From the home offices of Ash and Flo, this is Unbillable Hours, a podcast about professional services marketing. Stick around and listen to our insights, tips, and best practices to improve your firm's marketing and even your career.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Unbillable Hours. And this time we have Björn Salens coming in to talk more about social content and the future of content here. And Björn, thanks for being on the podcast, but I'll let you introduce yourself, unless Flo has something else to add.
No, please, Björn, do the honors yourself, if you will.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, everyone, and I'm really glad that we have some people listening, and hopefully I can keep you there till the end. But yeah, my name is Björn Salens, and I'm a journalist by background, but I currently work as head of content marketing consulting for LinkedIn. And I've been at LinkedIn for about 2.5 years. Is that a good enough intro, Ash and Flo?
I think it is. Wonderful. So if you can continue to speak about you just a little bit longer, I don't want to make this awkward, but I couldn't help but realize that you had a short stint in professional services as well, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, the interesting thing is, like, I worked client side for many years. I worked for BT for 12 years. I then went to be part of the launch team at Now TV. And what was interesting was at Now TV, we were trying very different things on content. We were creating more of an ecosystem where content was always on because our bread and butter was content. And so we and Capgemini at that time were working with us. So I got very close to the Capgemini team. And I think when you do a head of social and content role several times over, you can get bored. And I started to feel pigeonholed a little bit in that.
Okay.
So after that, interestingly, I did get offered a role at Accenture and Cap, and I sway towards Cap mainly because I had relationships there.
Yeah.
But it was the best, I would say, for me. And that's why I went into consulting with that LinkedIn, because it offers you that variety again.
Because can you, at least for me, right, for my benefit, educate me a little bit on your current job now? Is, I imagine, you work at LinkedIn and you advise clients, like brands that play on LinkedIn around their content strategies. Is that what it's like?
We basically, the thing is, any social platform content is like a connective thread. Mm-hmm. And especially in B2B marketing, most of B2B buying happens through discoverability. And so the team was set up to consult with clients on content marketing strategies. But what we found is that actually in B2B marketing, it goes wider because it does drift into marketing strategy as a whole. And so, we've evolved. And we don't work, obviously, we've got hundreds of thousands of clients, but we do work with our most valuable clients, on their strategies, because the outcome is better, bolder content on the platform, which helps us. And it helps our customers as well.
It helps both sides, I imagine.
Yeah,
that's fascinating, because you've seen both sides, right? You worked at Capgemini, now you work at LinkedIn, and Ash and I discuss a point quite often on this podcast, so people might be bored by it, but we see, or maybe it's wishful thinking, but we think a lot about how the distribution model for the typical professional services marketing content pieces, right? The good old thought leadership piece, how that either is changing in a very few cases, or in just my personal opinion, it should change because the old one doesn't seem to be working that much. Did you have any view on that in your position? What do you see happening there?
I think it's not just professional services. I think effectively B2B marketers have invested far too much in an ebook or tens of thousands of them.
Yeah.
And I think what we're really starting to see is that, especially in professional services, I think we are finally seeing a shift towards people understanding that the value in any professional services firm is their people.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about thought leadership, they, first of all, the big shift is that they're shifting from thought leadership as a ebook to shifting to thought leadership in the form of their people.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't like to sound cliche, but people in our business, or in that business anyway, when I work, people do buy from people,
Yeah.
ultimately, because your trust and credibility is at the foundation of people investing a lot of money to bring you in, give you access to their data, their employees, their strategies. And so really that people ecosystem is really important. I think the other thing, this is really fundamental, like with professional services, I think professional services have been quite lazy in the past. They've relied on their logo, shall we say. And
Yeah. Go
and
on.
Yeah,
I'm
listening
nodding
here.
Yeah.
and I think they've felt like their logo will do the brand talking for them and the brand nurturing. And the reality is that actually what we started to see, especially when I was at Gap, I think it was just 2014-15, we started to see this hybrid of that ecosystem being disrupted by agencies wanting to play in that space, boutique consulting firms playing in that space. And disruption is like the mother of innovation.
Yeah.
Because suddenly now, especially on LinkedIn, we've seen that professional services firms finally are investing in brand in a proper way again, which they need to, because that's about nurturing demand for the future, and far too long they've let that go.
Yeah,
So we
it's been quite transactional for a while there, if at all. I mean, there were many of them didn't even do any digital advertising at all.
Yeah, and we had a guest a couple of weeks ago, Chris, basically say, when's the last time you've actually read a piece of thought leadership cover to cover? And
yeah,
unfortunately,
ouch.
Flo and I both said it's been a while.
Yeah.
And that's the key reason we asked about the social distribution, because while people are the key, message spreaders, we're still struggling with the fact that what is the best way? Because we had Will Eek coming in and talking about using people, but also using delivery vehicles. And now you're saying that we're using people. And that just makes us curious. Like, how do you see professional services using people? Yes, people sell, but people are their own brand, and then the company is their own brand. And as you said, companies can just sell on basis of logos, but people aren't quite that way.
There is a healthy tension there, because as you use people more and more in your strategy, those people will rise up in their visibility, in their own personal brand. So that's one dynamic that brands have to kind of face into. And then the other dynamic is that actually, brands then want to be on equal power, so they want to try and find tactics to bring those people back into the main frame. And we have to, it's quite complicated. I was once with a CMO, and he was worried about his people being poached because they were so visible on the platform. But that's a natural tension anyway. But from my perspective, it's healthy. It's healthy because actually it allows people to talk one-on-one. It's a lot of brands, for example, want to target developers. Well, developers don't want to talk to marketers. They want to talk to people who know their stuff. So that's the tension you face into. But the reality is, I do think that there is a huge benefit for the brand and the personal brand of the employee.
So I'm curious though, how does that then change the content production process, or what changes do you see there? Because I'm guessing you said you're a journalist, so you know the newsroom model, right, and how that's done. Professional services marketing model was probably research, does some scrapes the data together, some SME helps shaping a story, and then marketing produces a piece and pushes it out. So that's sort of the status quo.
The process.
Is that changing now because of the factors you just mentioned? And where's it headed? Tell me what the future is.
Yes.
The features with that.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing is nobody really has cracked it, right? And I think that's why our roles still exist. So I'm gonna be thankful for that.
Which, by the way, yeah, thanks for saying that. People beat themselves up about, oh, we don't know this, we don't know. Yeah, maybe no one knows, right? But so what's a good experiment to run?
Figuring it out, figuring it out is the right the sort of way to look at it. But I think it depends on who's in the fore, right? And if it's the very top people, if it's a layer of C-suite people that's in the fore and they have a leader's voice, then what you do tend to find is that they have a whole enablement team that sits behind them. And we work with both. We'll work with the C-suite because they sometimes have to dig deep to find that personal brand and how it interconnects with driving for engagement. But then you work with the enablement team who sit behind them, which are really a combination of your content marketing team, your PR and comms team, as well as sometimes your marketing ecosystem.
And maybe can I call out my friends in the legal department? Hello.
Yes. And the more regulated you get, the more friends you have. Let's put it that way. But what we found with maybe, I would say, like at the C-suite level in big corporates, that's how it would work. But you do get a lot of scale-up companies who also adopt that strategy, and they've been highly successful at this purely by in-housing. And actually a lot of the scale-ups I work with, they don't even have agencies because they have in-house their content. And even when I moved, I worked in banking for 3 years. And as I was moving out, we built that model for the same reason that actually the moment you make content a core part of your strategy, the production process has got to be so fluid and rapid, and decision making becomes so important that you can't wait for the long turnarounds when it's housed outside your ecosystem.
And I think what's also weird is that taking the it's not even weird, but I don't know if you see this too, is if you take out the perfectionism and the production value, I try to be careful because this still has some merit, but like raw video or just your expert like having a clip or writing like as they would speak without marketing or legal or whoever intermediating and sort of editing it until it's just bland, that actually often works better. So
yeah, I totally.
It's interesting to see.
Exactly what we say. Like, ultimately, you're marketing to humans, and so the more human you are, the better. Otherwise, you're literally saying somebody else's script, and that translates through. And so you have to. That's why the one-to-one coaching is equally important, because unless they dig deeper, they're always going to be reading somebody else's script and not their own, not their own true voice.
So would you say, I don't know, I want to pose this idea. Would you say a role like yours might become sort of the template for a marketing function or job, or how marketing works inside a company? We've discussed this before in the podcast where I asked other people this questions like, okay, how does this change the marketing function? If you're not here to do the glossy PDF, right, for lack of a better example, maybe it becomes more like your job and it's more coaching, advising, figuring out the distribution strategy because the platform, these types of things. But the actual content production sort of goes out of marketing and back to the actual people who have the know-how and the client or customer insight.
Yeah, I definitely was on the cusp of that shift when I came into LinkedIn, because, for a long time when I started out in social, which was way back when, I won't even tell you when, but it was when I worked in British Telecom. But at that time, nobody thought social would drive the digital transformation that it did. In fact, and at C-suite level, they were still questioning if it was going to stay. Social teams became the powerhouses, and the knowledge sat with us, and we became like, the people who did everything, did the strategy. And then as people started to get more educated and social was here to stay, then people became interested. The marketing department became interested. The sales department became interested. PR and comms became interested, and then became a power struggle. And so you then started having all these different ecosystems trying to have their own say. But I've definitely found as I was coming into LinkedIn, I was on the cusp of actually we become enablers.
Yeah.
And we enable the organization within or from outside in, as we're doing now, to really start to embrace it in every part of the department. Because when I worked in banking, I actually made friends, because when I joined the place that I worked at, the team that I inherited, it was taking them about 3 months to turn around a piece of content. And one of the tactics I did
I'm not
was
laughing. We've seen the same. Yeah.
Know the feel.
I actually went on a process of befriending the team at risk to educate them. And the head of risk did a CIM course and came up with the distinction. And we started doing content in real time. And that is the power of enabling and educating. Because you can
Hold
then
on.
pick it up.
I just gotta because I'm a German guy. I have to ask. CIM, that's the Chartered Institute of Marketing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you get your risk senior manager sort of learn
To do
about
marketing.
marketing,
Yes.
and then help. Well, that is quite the accomplishment. I mean, it's a very smart thing to do, or a very very cool
I am a
play.
strategist. I am a strategist after all.
Not sure if it's easy to copy, but there you see,
Yeah.
right? You gotta make
So-
friends with people and then teach them. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. That's great.
And that kind of adds into the fact that marketers are moving. I mean, we already know that marketers are doing positioning, but marketers are being more of agents in image management development, so that if you're changing from the corporate voice to the human voice, you're saying that this is an effective strategy of educating them, not directly, but almost indirectly.
Yes, indirectly. Yeah, absolutely. And because, actually directly is more difficult when you're inside the organization.
Mhm.
Because I don't know, it's the sad thing about when you work as an expert inside an organization, people trust your voice less, even though you're saying absolutely credible things. And that's why managing consultants have a bad rep, right? Because you go into a client's site and you're housed there in the client side, and the team who are working immediately say, well, we've been saying this to leadership for a long time, and they're not listening to us, and you guys come in and they listen to you. And I see that in my role now as well as consultants, where they value our outside in perspective. And I do think that we do bring an outside in perspective, because I head up EMEA and LATAM. And so I work across cultures, across verticals, across different types of levels. And so that is the value you bring from an outside in perspective. You know?
That's great. Mentioning your outside in view, I don't know. I'm just imagining maybe you sometimes still look back at consulting firms because you worked at one, and we don't have to name particular names, but the industry as a whole, is there anything you see they could be doing?
Yeah.
Whether it's in social distribution or particularly on LinkedIn, what they're missing. If I may, I have one example. I see, and this is the paid stuff, which is probably not that, but I see so many ads in my own LinkedIn feed. They're just over glorified banners. Do you know what I mean? It's a branded color block, some text on it, and that's it. And I'm like, you could do like 15 other things, but you show me basically a banner ad inside my LinkedIn feed. Thanks. That's great. I'm not going to click that. And I should be very clear. I have done like hundreds of those myself, right? Okay, so I'm guilty of the same thing. But that's just that's the one example that comes to my mind where I think there's maybe more opportunity. We just haven't thought about it. So anything you have in terms of
Ash, you look like you want to add in there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I want to add into what Flo saying.
No
worries. So the thing about what Flo said is it's not just that the company ads look like banner ads. You often find regurgitated posts from like multiple people from the same company that say the exact same thing with the exact image and everything. And you must be seeing a lot of that. And what is your advice to these companies? Because essentially they'll continue to keep doing this, and it doesn't really impact apart from anyone who's connected to all these people are just going to see the same thing spammed.
Yeah. First of all, I think the problem with that is that I don't know whether because I came from B2C as well, B2C is very audience focused, and B2B say they're audience focused. As a category, we say we're audience focused, but we're not audience focused. We're just obsessed with our own message sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why even when it's not a copy paste, it feels like a copy paste. And one of the tricks that we play on clients is that we put up a lot of different images, but we take out the logos, we take out the copy, and you will not be able to tell the difference.
That is mean, but I like it.
But sometimes you have to use shock tactics.
Yeah.
Because because as marketers, we're so involved in our own insular thinking that we don't realize that we are in that way. And the advice is quite simply that first of all, you've got to be audience focused. Secondly, we're far too obsessed with measuring short-term results, like how many leads did I get this week? Sometimes how many leads did I get this day? We have to start to think not just about short-term but long-term as well, and building both demand for the future as well as in the short term.
Yeah.
And like those are the brilliant basics. Like we have to first get them to adopt those brilliant basics in order to then talk about tactics. Because if we went in as a team and we start talking about, say, stories, or start talking about video, we're just going to get more content that doesn't resonate in the right way. So we first have to get them thinking strategically. And then once we get them to understand who their audiences are, what their message pillars are, then we start to talk about tactics of execution. And on LinkedIn, there's, in terms of tactics, hugely unexplored tactics, like even simple things like organic posting, using just simple questions, because ultimately social is still a dialogue. It's still a conversation, just like we're having here. If you all weren't asking me questions, I wouldn't be responding, to you all with the right this thing. So simple things like that. To then the obvious ones we've seen is, a real massive shift towards live streaming. We've seen, like, I think the stat is like 400% increase in live streaming. And for me, the thing that live streaming does is it forces them into the mindset that we want, which is be human, be authentic, be topic and really relevant in your content. And hopefully we will then start to shift towards, like, storytelling through formats like stories, think about attention span. So rather than create long types of video, think about different ways that you can tell that story. So there's lots of opportunity, but I think we're still getting people to adopt brilliant basics.
I love that. And I love the phrase, by the way, brilliant basics. That's very good. Yeah. No, I would say you're 100% right in the diagnosis with the audience thing is spot on. And Ash, you always mention stakeholder management. I always come back to this because I'm sorry, Bjorn, I always hammer home this point. But consulting firms in particular are very bad at the audience centricity thing, because they look at the world through the lens of their internal structure, which is usually industry practices, and that is as narrow as they can get, right? They always go and you ask them as a marketer and say, okay, who are we talking to? And then the practice says, well, it's obvious, it's the automotive industry. And I'm like, that's not the C-suite in the automotive industry. Yeah, thank you. My most hated upon example. That's as audience centric as it gets, which of course it's not zero, but it's not even close to, I don't know, 30%, right? You could, I love that point. And I had when you said, and you're exactly right to get to the strategic first, otherwise we get more content doesn't resonate. You're right. I suddenly had an image of badly animated banner ads because someone figured out, hey, we can do GIFs.
We can do animation. For me, really professional. Sorry, I don't want to stop with the questions, but for me, really professional services firms have got to stop being like for like. Like,
Yeah.
I think they're just almost a copy, a clone of each other. And I think, I have to say that there are some brands that are trying to make that shift, right? Like I do see the likes of Accenture, EY's strategy around better questions. There are some brands that are trying to make that shift, but they still, to your point, Flo, they're still talking to industry verticals as opposed to audiences.
And they all sound very much alike. And I sometimes during presentations, if I want to annoy the audience, if there's senior consultants in the room, I often say consulting industry to me is a lot like bottled water, right? There are a few brands which stand out, but let's not kid ourselves. Don't think for a second that you're not a commodity as an industry, right?
Yes.
If I need tax advisory, I go out and get some. That's where you start from. It's a commoditized service offering, and so then you have to think about what can marketing do to maybe change that. Because again, just because you're water doesn't mean you can't be a bottled water brand. There are brands who've done it, but don't think you're special at the beginning. Don't. It's a mistake. Sorry, I'll stop here. How are we for time, Ash? I think we're coming. We're coming to against 20 the clock. Minutes. So I don't know, Björn, do you have anything you are working on which you are excited about and you want to share at this point?
I think things that I'm excited about. I mean, the thing that excited me about the COVID period was actually the incremental rise in learning. And I really love I'm a learner, so I really like that we are moving to an ecosystem which is a culture of learning. And if there was one thing that I would say professional services brands can adopt, it is more that culture of learning and becoming educators and enablers. I think the problem that we have with when we're consultants is we're worried about our IP. And so we tend not to share our IP. But the whole ecosystem on LinkedIn is about value exchange. And the more you give, the more you get, So that culture of learning is definitely an opportunity. And, I use LinkedIn Learning a lot. And I've grown exponentially just from using that platform. And so even though it's not directly related to my job, I still feel that culture of learning is an opportunity.
Well, but I think it might be because creating content for such learning formats might also be an avenue to explore. And that's a bit a tangential remark, but I've always admired how some of the industrial companies I see in the B2B space, whether it's, I'm going to name a few just randomly because I think their stuff is great. Like if you look at ABB or Schneider Electric, I think does the same. Probably Siemens do the same, I don't know. But people who work with, let's say, electricians and stuff, they have like entire freaking online universities where you get certified for using certain pieces of equipment, all that stuff. So they're sort of merging this idea of content marketing with this idea of customer success or maybe even customer support, built a self-service learning tool on top of it. And that's that. Yeah. And I have definitely told clients, bringing this back to LinkedIn Learning, I've told clients to pitch for, there's a process, right, where you can get an instructor, advise clients to pitch to get that position if they have something interesting to say and they're good at telling it. I have yet to find one who then actually does it. I'll let you know. But I think it could be an interesting format for consultancies to spread their know-how
and make it available.
And make it available.
I know LinkedIn itself made about 600 courses available free for people because people's jobs were disrupted, and actually we have a social responsibility now to spread that education. In terms of, sorry, go ahead, Flo.
Just wanted to say, I don't know where LinkedIn, were those like specifically built, or was that content LinkedIn had anyways for internal purposes?
No, so basically LinkedIn Learning as a platform is paid for generally, and so they released a lot of those LinkedIn Learning courses for free. But the other thing that is close to my heart is the subject of creativity. I think this is a great time to be a creator. I mean, I'm suddenly channeling my son into that mode because for a long time, I think creators flew under the radar and they were back office, and all of a sudden every single platform is putting them into the spotlight because finding and creating good content and getting creative cut through has become so difficult, and for me, so one of the things that I've done in this last thing is I hired my first creative strategist, separate to strategy consulting, but just on creative. For us, we've launched something called Creative Labs, and it's really about getting brands to explore the white space, and sometimes even creative agencies, to work with them to explore the white space, because we become so data driven that we are forgetting that actually we've got to sometimes explore the white space and take intelligent risks.
We got to bring you back at some point in time. I love this stuff. You're preaching to the choir. I actually, this is a side note, but I actually personally hate the term data driven because I don't want to be data driven. I'd like to be data informed. Thanks.
Yes.
But I'm doing the driving, right? That's maybe that's my German, that the English doesn't make sense for me. But data driven to me seems to imply the data drives me around, and I gotta run this way and that way, depending on what the numbers say. No, that's not. Yeah. That's how you get average results, right? Because regression to the mean is a real thing.
Exactly, and
so creativity is where it is. Yeah.
That's such music to my ears, because I think that is fundamentally one of the biggest issues with B2B marketing, that we are so sort of driven by exactly what the numbers are telling us in a short-term way, rather than using it for insight and then developing strategy on insight. And it's also one of the issues I'm still curious and observing around AI-driven content, because for me, creativity doesn't come from bots. Creativity will always be in the power of the human being, mind and being. And so even though I'm watching that space with interest, I worry about it as well.
I would even stick my neck out and publicly make a prediction, because that's never gonna really work. Why? Because if you drive down the price of something, you at the same time devalue it. That's just the truth. And that's it. If like bots write the content, it's not worth anything. Maybe I read it on the train if there's nothing else, because I need to fill the void or something. But I'm not going to seek that out the way I seek out a novelist or a painter or whatever it is. I don't know.
But that ties in nicely to what you were saying earlier, Bian, about trust, because all the creative ingenuity and everything that we do is what helps build that trust, and the insights that we create, that we find, should help us drive better consumer trust and eventually delight them, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think I think as consultants, that's the part we should play, to try and create that understanding that I'm not against measuring, but I am against being driven by the purpose of measurement and not really your customer or your potential customer, And I've spent many a time, especially like when I was client side, my team spending too much time on spreadsheets that somebody glances at once and never looks at again.
And there's a whole additional episode, Ash, in this point, that people get so confused because at a higher or as a strategic level, I think marketing as a business is a revenue driving function for the entire business, and that means data is important, but you got to look at business level data and across the silos. So, but if you spend all your time in your marketing analytics, like inevitably you at some point you can optimize some of the tactical stuff, but eventually you'll make very bad decisions because you only see like a slice of the pie, whereas you will never be taken seriously because you just slice of the pie, man or woman, versus seeing the entire. My cake metaphor here is running completely away from me, but yeah.
But to add what you said, Flo, it's just we'll have to bring Biana to talk about how this ties into customer satisfaction, because that's the only way we can get this.
Yeah.
Yes,
That also.
and I guess the reason I'm passionate about it is because one of the jobs I did was I helped when I worked at BT. I helped with the care, leading the BT Care strategy, where we digitized our contact centers. And when you get into scale and digital transformation like that, you understand the power of data in a positive way, as opposed to just for a measurement. So I'll come back for the customer session.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
It's great.
All right. I mean, this was great already. Ash, do you want to wrap us up or?
Okay, sure.
Cool.
So, thanks for joining us, Bian. This has been an amazing discussion, and we've actually found that a lot of what you said ties in, and we also got a lot of new insights, which is essentially what Flo and I intend to do with this podcast as well. So thank you for coming on the show.
This was brilliant. Thanks, Bian. Do come back sometime if you have
Yes.
the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Unbillable Hours. If you want more, tune in next week. You know where to find us.